Some of you may recall this old shelter. I had it posted about 5 years ago. I called it a homeless emergency shelter or spare room. I'm getting ready to move soon and I got to downsize. Unfortunately, today I'm going to be tearing this guy apart. But I thought before I do, seeing that I didn't do any plans on it, that I'd show you some more detail on how it was made and just kind of how I felt the whole thing turned out. First, here's a little history. This was my first experiment with campaign signs. I collected 5 of them. The wood that was used to hold up the signs was cut up on a table saw. And everything was fastened with the screws that also came from the sign. The design was pretty much taken from my Burning Man bicycle camper. This is just a bigger version that's stationary. But after arcing the 2 sheets that made up the roof, I had about an 18-inch overhang in the front. So I decided to make a closet on one side, and on the other side of the door, I made a little greenhouse. I taped a simple gutter up to the roof. That way I could collect rainwater into a 15-gallon tank. I'd siphon that water and put it into a camping solar shower bag. You'd hang that high in the sun for a few hours, put your tray in your entryway and your shower curtain. Voila, free shower. Now I didn't have this in the spare room, but this is a sawdust toilet that I had at my Burning Man bicycle camper. Worked pretty good in a pinch. On the inside I had my little swivel reclining chair for reading and relaxing. Also had room there to reach behind to my closet, access laptop or bookshelves. There's my trash can, radio and shelf above. Ceiling mounted shelf for folded clothes. Wasn't that hard to get undressed and go to sleep in the shelter. There was no bathroom, but you could clean yourself up. No real drain or anything, just throw it out the window. Kitchen was hybrid. I had a butane stove, but I also had power. That was to power the little igloo wine cooler that held a nominal amount of food, microwave, lights, cell phone, charger, and a radio. The drinking water and large food supplies were stored above the desk, and the shelf support actually had some shelves to store smaller items. There was also room for 4 small storage containers underneath the desk. And by moving the butane stove above the microwave oven, it freed up the table to just give you a huge working surface. Here I'm just demonstrating drawing. The door threshold also acted as a place to sit, relax, look out, and kind of acted as a porch. Now I've always been intrigued with making a living space in the minimal size as possible, and minimal expense too. But obviously you could change the interior design around to suit your needs. But for a shelter for a homeless person in an established encampment, this would be a lot better than a tent. Or if you have a teen wanting some independence from your house, set it up in the backyard. This could be a good trainer just to show them what it's like to strike it out on their own. For those of you who are interested in building this, I'm now going to show you how it's done. First, you take 2 sheets, tape them on both sides. Lay it on the floor, measure in 1 inch, and slice just 1 wall. Flip it over, measure in 2 inches, and slice through 1 wall. Bend the tabs in like the arrows show you, and you should get something looking like this. Now you need your sidewalls. I used just 1 sheet, cut it in half, but I also narrowed it down to 44 inches in width. The radius is about 32 inches. I put 2 of those halves together and cut them all at the same time. And this is what rests up against the lip you just created. And this is how the zip ties fasten it down. Holes on the top of the lip. And then here's a good example. Whoop. So it's going through the roof, into the wall, and back around. And when you cinch this guy down, it's pushing the sidewall up against this lip here. To keep moisture from coming in, we put the floor pan inside these walls. The measurement between the 2 inside walls is going to determine the length of your floor pan, or the flap crease marks. That's where these are. Here you see the zip ties attaching the floor pan to the walls. I poke my holes about 2 inches apart for each zip tie and then place the zip ties about 1 foot apart from one another. The front wall is made of 2x2s and also has a 2x6 threshold, but we'll get to that in a minute. I wanted this to be kind of a greenhouse here, so I made these racks. Added this mylar to the door. I just stapled it on, quite simply. Hinged. The outer sections I made with just scraps that I have and some 24 by 18 small campaign signs. That just brings down there. Shuts pretty tight. Got your little lock hasp there in your handle. This was under a tree actually where I had this for the last 5 years. But if you're saying, Paul, how come you didn't give this to a homeless person? Well, it's totally fallen apart. On the window detail, I described the inside of this just through the one wall. That gave me a hinge. Beautiful thing about Coroplast, it's polypropylene, and you can create a hinge like this and it'll last for thousands of repetitions. Now some of you might be saying, well, Paul, it's not campaign season, so where do I get this stuff? You can purchase it now on Home Depot's online store. Currently, the 4x8, 4mm, or 0.157 thickness sheets go for about $20 a sheet. They deliver to their store. Unfortunately, you got to go and pick it up yourself. Well, on to the destruction. Here we go. These little screws, they work perfect for installing these walls. Up here I have a little 90-degree brace, 1x2, just to give support to the entryway. Here I am pulling out the bolts that held the greenhouse to the main structure. All the lumber came from the campaign signs. I just bucked it all up on the table saw. Screws too from the signs were used to assemble it all. The corners were simply made by folding it over, poking some holes, and then just popping it with zip ties every 10 inches or so. To further support the roof on this end, seeing it didn't have a frame, I made these two little brackets. Here's a better view of the shelving. Here you can see the 1/2-inch conduit. And it held quite a bit of clothing actually. Worked real good. Here's some shots of me assembling the bookshelves using just scraps of Coroplast and some of those 18 by 24 campaign signs. So I created this big ass door because I wanted a little sunshade and rain shade, but I didn't want it to be just flimsy Coroplast, so I made a frame out of 1x2. It's this guy here. I measured a little under to fit in this frame, the opening, door opening, shimmed it, and screwed it on this side all the way to the top. Then I took my razor knife and cut in between the door frame and the front wall. And that created a nice tight fitting door. For the hinge, it's actually just the polypropylene bending on the top. Also created this little door on the greenhouse. That way I could crack it open and let the warm air from the greenhouse inside. Or close it when it gets too hot. So here I'm showing you the front 2x2 wall. It's really the only framing in this thing. The side walls help support everything once they all get tied to the roof and the other components. Makes it pretty rigid. It's a little better view of the threshold. 2x6. That way I can sit down on it. So as to how the campaign signs held up after 5 years of being exposed, well, this was the backside. As we go higher and higher to where this is exposed to the elements, you see the ink pretty much just came off. As far as the tape goes, let's look at the tape. Again, I used duct tape on this, which wasn't good. You can see this is just the skeleton here. It's not really covering anything. But the Gorilla Tape won out. And that's this over here. It's still holding fast, good and strong. Here's a screw where it had a little water breach. Right next to it though, this one stayed nice and dry and didn't corrode like the neighbor there. So my analysis is the wider the piece you have to cover over your screw, the better. Now it might shrink up and delam quite a bit like you see here, but it's going to last longer. This again is Gorilla Tape. That's a fresh looking screw. These I covered up twice. Oh man, that's sticky stuff. Yeah, those are zip ties for my clothes shelf. See a delam in here. Yeah, 5 years of hard exposure. Not real hard. Like I said, I'm not in Phoenix, Arizona or anything. I'm in Washington State, which is pretty rainy. We still get a lot of sun. But, again, not too bad. For campaign signs, right? For a freebie. Here are the shelves for the kitchen area. This, dollar store, cheap shelf liner. Anyway, I'm gonna keep tearing this guy apart. But there it is, folks. The homeless emergency spare room. Hey, appreciate you staying tuned and checking this little guy out. Yeah, what can I say? Fun little project for not much money. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye. I had a little extra here, so I decided to add a little extra room. Hey, Lucy. Now the shape itself, oh dear. So the shape itself, sorry, was based after my bicycle camper.